Kia ora e te iwi, no mai ki Central News. E whakanoia i te wiki o te reo Māori ko Hilary Entwistle ahau, me ngā karere o te wā. Research analysis and insight into national standards, the RAINS report, is the brainchild of University of Waikato professor. Professor Martin Thrupp, RAINS report to the government, studied 6 schools and found that judgments against the national standards were being affected by many sources of variation at national, regional, school and classroom level. Martin says it is quite wrong to expect to compare any school's pattern of achievement against national standards with that of any other school, even for schools with relatively similar intake characteristics, such as the same decile.
The main thing that's found is that schools are barely on the same page in terms of the way they're responding to the national standards, let alone the very specific details of what they're all doing. And so it makes it impossible to compare between the schools, and really a question of whether they're local standards or national standards.
Waikato Bay of Plenty Kia Magic coach Nolene Tairoa's time with the team ended on a disappointing note when her team bowed out to a superior Queensland Firebirds 53-30 in the minor semi-final in Hamilton on Sunday. Finishing 4th in the regular season, Firebirds were superior across the court against the 3rd place Magic as they booked themselves a showdown with Melbourne Vixens to decide who will face Adelaide Thunderbirds in the grand final. Clinically efficient from the outset, Firebirds stamped their mark early, maintaining their intensity from start to finish as they kept Kia Magic on the back foot. The visitors did little wrong after a sizzling start from which Magic never recovered. Now for our region's weather. Hamilton, your Tuesday will have cloudy periods and a chance of a shower with a westerly breeze. Your expected high is 15 and an overnight low of 4. Tauranga, long fine spells and a westerly breeze too. Your expected high is 16 and an overnight low of 8. Just ahead, studying the behaviour of dogs. Welcome to Central News on TV Central. A University of Waikato student has specifically focused her PhD on dog training and the timing of rewards. She has also teamed up with Hamilton City Council Animal Education and Control and the Hamilton SPCA to give free seminars about dog behaviour and training to the public. We caught up with a PhD student and dog expert herself, Claire Brown, to learn some secrets about training man's best friend.
Why did you decide to specifically focus your PhD on dog training and the timing of rewards?
Well, I was really interested in how dogs and humans communicate, and the more research I did on that topic, the more I realised that the timing of it hadn't necessarily been investigated that much. So I looked at aspects of communication that we could focus on with regards to timing, and the timing of when we give rewards, give feedback to dogs, seemed like a really good place to focus on.
In the world of animal training, how do dogs compare with other animals?
Dogs are really trainable. We've got quite close relationships with a lot of different animals. We spend a lot of time with cats and horses, and pigs are really trainable, things like that. But we've got a really long history working with dogs. They were the first domesticated animals, so I think that sort of says quite a lot about our relationship with them and how trainable they are.
How did you design your experiment?
So I knew that to investigate the timing of reinforcement or rewards, we needed to sort of get humans out of the picture. So I'd set it up in quite an artificial situation in a lab. So we had a large experimental pen, which is where the dogs worked, and I sat in the pen next door to them, but I had a screen in between us so that they couldn't pick up on my body language. I had 2 boxes which I had dog food in overnight, and I tipped it out before the experiment, so the boxes smelt really attractive to the dogs, and I put these boxes inside the pen. The task for the dogs was actually to learn to stick their head inside one of the boxes, which I know sounds like not a very useful thing for dogs to learn, but it served the purpose for us for testing this. The top surface of the boxes were crisscrossed with infrared beams. So as soon as the dogs went and sniffed the boxes, they broke those infrared beams. They were connected to a computer, which is what delivered the food. So that's how the dogs were trained to stick their noses in the box. So I put the boxes into the pen, and then I let the dogs into the pen, and they were allowed to just explore it freely. When they went and sniffed the non-target box, they got no consequences, so they got no treats for that. But when they sniffed inside the target box, breaking those infrared beams, the computer then delivered positive reinforcement, or a little piece of dog food, either immediately for 20 dogs, or it started a timer and that was delayed for 1 second for another 20 dogs. And the advantage of using this equipment and doing it in this way, even though it seems like it's not a particularly practical task or anything like that to teach dogs, was that we could be really precise with the timing, and it took out all the human communication cues as well.
As you learnt more about your research topic of training dogs, did you ever have to change your experiment process?
Yeah, it took quite a while to get the protocol up and running and working smoothly. At first I looked at getting dogs to break infrared beams by maybe having them walk into a corner or pass through beams through like a narrow passageway, and then we got on to using boxes that smelled like dog food, so the dogs would sniff them, but we had a really large room. Then we worked down to getting a really like a medium-sized room, and then into a large pen. So it took a bit of trial and error to get there in the end.
What have you discovered during your research?
Well, the biggest finding was that delays of just 1 second can impact on learning for some dogs. So I tested 40 dogs in total, so 20 of them they learnt this task, but they were given no delay at all to reinforcement, so they got immediate reinforcement, and 60% of those dogs learnt the task. On the other hand, of the 20 dogs that had the 1 second delay, only 25% of them learnt, so that's less than half.
Tell me about your free seminars.
So back in 2001, I got together with an associate of the SPCA, Tracy Wild, and Amanda Tucker, works for Hamilton City Council Animal Education and Control. And all of us independently had been thinking for quite a long time that it would be really good to provide some education to dog owners, because we'd seen a lot of training that wasn't going so well out in the real world. A lot of stress from owners, a lot of stress from dogs, and a lot of it we thought could be preventable if people just maybe knew how to communicate with their dogs a little bit better. So we got together and decided that we'd all work together and make a seminar that we could present to dog owners, just running over a few of the basic things like how dogs learn, basic dog body language, how to prevent and manage behaviour problems, and just setting up some common sense rules and boundaries.
Why are you offering them for free?
Well, basically we don't want any barrier for people to get this information, so we thought if we offered them for free then maybe more people would come along, and that's the aim of it really.
Do you have any coming up?
Yeah, we've got the next one, which is going to be held on the 22nd of July. At the start of this year we approached Animates, and we are presenting them through the Bridge Street Animate store here in Hamilton, so if anyone's interested in coming they should just give the store a call.
How has your research changed the way you treat dogs?
I think that, well, I hope that I've become a bit of a better trainer myself, because I'm more focused on timing now. I'm more aware of it when I'm working and training with my own dogs, so I hope so.
What tips can you give to people who want to train their dogs?
There would be 3 main things really. The first thing would be to be really consistent with your dog. So that's whether or not you are consistent with your commands, consistent with your rules, or within your family everyone should have the same rules and all stick to that. Second would be timing, so be really, really fast with your positive reinforcement when you're training your dog. And the third thing would be just to make sure you train your dog what they should be doing, because too often we train our dogs not to do a whole lot of things, but we often don't teach them what they should be doing instead. So people often find they have a lot less frustration if they do that.
And Claire's next seminar will be held on the 22nd of July at Bridge Street, Hamilton. Coming up next, Ngāti Haua's settlement. Welcome back. Te Arawa Iwi Ngāti Haua will have their treaty settlement soon completed. I spoke with Ngāti Haua about the settlement and the history of the iwi. Kia ora Muna, welcome to our program.
Kia ora, Hiri.
So what are some of the details of your settlement package there?
The treaty settlement package that Ngāti Haua have negotiated is worth $20 million. It's made up of 3 different parts. The first part being the financial redress, where Ngāti Haua will get a cash settlement of $9 million. The second part is called the cultural redress, which is worth $6.7 million, which sees some of the returns of our significant sites, like Maungakawa, like Pokemako and Te Tāpui. And also within their cultural redress, there's financial support to what we know as the tūmaki, or the role that Ngāti Haua plays as kingmakers. And also the final component of the cultural redress is $1 million that's coming towards supporting what we know as the Kauwhanganui, or the Māori Parliament, which stands at one of our Ngāti Haua marae. And yeah, lastly, is what we call the commercial redress, where we've been given the opportunity to purchase some of land assets owned by the Crown. So that's worth $3.3 million.
Because where does Ngāti Haua's rohe area extend to?
The rohe begins at Te Aroha, skips along the Kaimais to a place called Te Wera Iti, which is just north of the highway going over to Tauranga. It skips across the plains to Maunga Tautari, and then heads north and captures the outskirts of Hamilton City, and then to a place called Manga Te Paru, which is just north of Morrinsville, and then back to Te Aroha.
It's quite a large area, eh? Yeah. So what was the process you guys had to go through for the settlement?
The negotiation process is something that takes normally 3 to 4 years. We've managed to do it in 7 months. Yeah, so it's been an accelerated journey for us. It involves different milestones that we needed to achieve and make sure that the Crown was satisfied with. The first part was really getting approval from our people that they supported the Ngāti Haua Trust Board as the mandated entity to settle the claims on their behalf. We achieved that in December last year. Alongside that, we negotiated with the Crown what is known as terms of negotiations, which is really an agreement with the Crown that these are going to be the terms of how we negotiate with one another. So it's basically a relationship thing. The next phase is what they call an agreement in principle. So we put up to the Crown what were our bottom lines in terms of a settlement package. They agreed with that in principle, subject to ongoing negotiations. Just recently, we signed off the fourth milestone, which was the initialing of the deed of settlement itself. So basically, it's where the Crown is satisfied with what they're offering Ngāti Haua. Ngāti Haua are satisfied with what the Crown's offering, but we need to send out to the people, to Ngāti Haua, the details of that settlement, and for them to be satisfied with it. And so we're currently in the stage of a voting process where our people will get the vote on the settlement.
Because you mentioned taking it to your people, and nearly a third of Ngāti Haua's population actually live in Australia. How did you guys go about, kind of having to go over Australia and get their opinion, and, why is that so important?
We made a commitment as a trust board, and I must acknowledge the trust board that they made a commitment that they wanted to bring our people on this journey. It wasn't a journey just reserved for the trust board alone, but it was a journey that we all needed to walk. And so from that commitment, we committed to all our people, no matter where they lived, that we would, as best we could, and within budgets, of course, go out to them and inform them of what the settlement package was and how that would affect them.
Just out of interest, there are a lot of Māori jumping the ditch. Why do you think they are?
I think no different from anyone else, really. Work opportunities. I think the want for a better lifestyle. And yeah, whilst we were in Australia, you know, I've got to say that our people are living that dream. You know, they're all working, they're all doing well. They're owning their own homes, some of them 2, 3 homes. So, you know, they're doing fantastically well. So, yeah, their dreams of having a good lifestyle are coming true for them, and good on them.
And lastly, just quickly, so the signing will be on the 17th of July, is that right? 18th, sorry. Yeah. And what marae will that be at?
At Rukumoana, which is a marae in Morrinsville. Yeah, so that will take place on the 18th of July. However, we've got to wait for the official results to come in from the voting, which we will get back on the 3rd of July. If our people, and we're fairly confident that they will, if our people vote in favour of the settlement package, then the 18th of July will be a reality.
Well, kia ora Muna, thank you very much for coming in, and all the best with the rest of the settlement.
Awesome, thank you.
To find out more about the iwi, visit ngatihawatrustboard.co.nz. Just ahead, researching in Antarctica. If you have just joined us, welcome to Central News. 2 Antarctic researchers at the University of Waikato, Dr. Charles Lee and Professor Craig Carey, have secured $60,000 funding from New Zealand Antarctica Research Institute to fund a year-long pilot study in Antarctica. The study will focus on developing and validating tools to measure how the ecosystems in Antarctica respond to change. We talked to Dr. Charles Lee to find out more about the $60,000 funding and how it will be used in the year-long Antarctic research.
Tell me about this year-long research in Antarctica.
Right. So we've been funded by the New Zealand Antarctic Research Institute, which is also called NZARI, to do a study where we will validate 3 of the biological metrics that we've designed and developed to try and monitor early biological responses to changes in environmental conditions. So the first measure that we want to use is panfluorometry, which essentially measures in real time photosynthesis that happens in lichens and algae. And it's an extremely sensitive measure, which means it measures at the cellular level. So if there is any photosynthetic activity at all, it picks it up and it logs it. So this will allow us to understand how photosynthetic activity, which is the basis of all biology, it feeds all the entire food chain in the system, how it responds to environmental conditions and how it will likely respond to changes in environmental conditions. The second measure that we wanted to examine and validate is the respiration of CO2 from soil. So there are plenty of drivers that either absorb or release CO2 within the soil. Some of it is biological, some of it is geological, and some of it is chemical. And it's a very complex process in the dry valleys, which is poorly understood. So, but it's also one of the most fundamental measurements because it allows us to examine the functional response of the entire microbial community within the landscape. So what we're going to do is we're not quite at the point where we can just simply measure CO2 and say this is the response. We actually need to go in and understand a little bit better what is driving the release and capture of CO2. And then finally, this is the third research is really unique to our group because for the past few years, we've been making significant advances in understanding the microbial ecology of the Antarctic dry valleys. And what we have found is that it really, contrary to popular belief, it responds to change really quite rapidly. Within a few years, if there is a significant enough change in environmental conditions, we will see a change in microbiology. So for the past 3 years, we've had basically a environmental manipulation experiment that's been ongoing. So we're going to continue doing that expand on that to try and use microbiology as a biometric for environmental change.
How did you feel when you were awarded the $60,000 funding?
Well, it's great because this is one of the first. This is among the first research grants given out by Ansari to the New Zealand scientific community, and we feel very privileged that terrestrial ecology has been recognized by the funding committee as something that's really important that needs to be funded in this first round, which will allow us to understand how these biometrics will work, whether they work at all, and sort of characterize their response to environmental drivers. And this would lay a framework for our further research that hopefully we will be able to start planning and design to allow us to monitor change in the dry valleys as a whole, as a system.
So of all the places you could pick to study, why Antarctica?
So, well, Antarctica is really a unusual place, not just in the lack of humans, but it's also devoid of vascular plants. So the largest plants you will see down there would be mosses and lichens, and there would be no trees. And that makes for a very simple ecosystem. And as a microbial ecologist, we really want to have a system where we have as few things influencing as possible so that we can better understand the drivers that do influence it. Because these drivers are quite often very subtle, and their effect in a normal system, say in a pasture setting, will be completely overwhelmed by the biology overlaying that landscape. Whereas in Antarctica, because much of that is absent, we can really get at the drivers of ecology in that environment, and we can use that knowledge to better understand other environments.
It's a big project. Will you be getting any help with your research?
Absolutely. This project is really very interdisciplinary, which means that we are integrating knowledge and expertise from a wide variety, a wide spectrum of fields. For this particular research, this would include soil science, which is going to be contributed by our colleague down at Lincoln University. And we also have a colleague up in St. Francis Xavier University in Canada who will be helping with the CO2 measurements. And then our colleagues in Spain and Germany will be contributing toward the measurement on photosynthesis. So with this funding, we will be able to have all of them join us in the field to carry out this research, and we expect to be in the field for much of January next year.
That is the news for today. We really want you to be involved, so like us on Facebook and let us know your views. If you have your own news, including your own video and photos, go to our website and hit upload. Thanks for joining us. Amy will be here tomorrow night with more guests from in and around the regions. I'm Hilary Entwistle. Have a lovely evening.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.